Thank you very much for tuning in to this poster presentation. Paid loot boxes are products in video games that players buy to obtain randomized rewards of varying value. These mechanics are prevalent in video games, including those marketed at children. Approximately 60% of mobile games in the UK contain loot boxes. Most of the time, the player will receive a reward that is perceived to be worth less than the price of the loot box. However, very rarely, the player will receive a reward that is more valuable. Players often purchase multiple loot boxes in order to attempt to obtain the valuable rare rewards. This is why loot boxes have been considered conceptually and structurally akin to gambling. 16 previously published studies have found a positive correlation between loot box expenditure and problem gambling severity. Generally, the higher a player's problem gambling severity was, the more that player spent on loot boxes. This link has been relied upon before policymakers in many countries to argue in favor of loot box regulation. This is problematic because all 16 previous studies use samples of people from Western countries. This means that the research conclusions cannot necessarily be generalized to non-Western countries due to culture and many other reasons. Loot box regulation is a global issue because players from every country engage with these mechanics. For example, Brazil is currently considering whether or not to regulate loot boxes. However, we do not know whether the Western literature can be relied upon there. We therefore set out to attempt to replicate this correlation amongst mainland Chinese video game players in a pre-registered study that sought to refine the pre-existing methodology by only giving the problem gambling assessment scale to participants self-reporting passive gambling participation, rather than all participants. More details about our study design and the demographics of our sample are shown on the poster. In short, we failed to replicate the positive correlation between loot box purchasing and problem gambling severity. We argue that our failure to replicate this correlation may have been caused by the lack of gambling product availability. In China, the only legal gambling product is traditional lotteries, which might seem outdated, boring, and undesirable to young video game players. In contrast, in Western countries, many other types of gambling that are more gamified are legally available. We suggest that loot box expenditure may only be correlated with certain types of gambling, rather than gambling participation in general. Additionally, we question whether previous studies' design decision to give the problem gambling assessment scale to all participants may have caused a degree of nuisance reporting that exaggerated the strength of the correlation, even in Western countries. Future studies should attempt to develop a more nuanced understanding of the relationship between loot box purchasing and gambling. Further replication efforts are needed in both non-Western and Western countries. Thank you very much.